But first, let's get into some football. Let's get into Kansas City Chiefs, defending champion Kansas City Chiefs, and the New York Jets, who played an unexpectedly entertaining football game, with the Chiefs coming out and prevailing 23-20 in MetLife Stadium in the Meadowlands. And what is mind-boggling, what is wild, and I'll get into sort of Zach Wilson, his night overall a little later, but Zach Wilson in basically every metric outplayed Patrick Mahomes. Threw for more yards, threw for more touchdowns, didn't throw for any picks, although he did fumble, but Mahomes threw 2 really bad picks, had a better QBR, had a better passer rate. I'm sorry, Mahomes had the slightly better QBR. I'm not quite sure how. Zach Wilson had the significantly better passer rating. Matter of fact, it was over 100, and he got some help from his running game, got over 100 yards from guys like Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook, and company. So props to Zach Wilson. Again, I'll get into Zach a little later in the show. But I think, and some of this has to do with the Bills-Dolphins game, which I'll talk about a little later today. I feel like there is a little bit of an overreaction to Kansas City's play, in particular Mahomes' play. I'm starting to wonder if Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are almost becoming the way that Brady and Belichick were during the Patriots dynasty, in that September / obviously yesterday, first day of October, the first 5, maybe even 6 weeks of the season, it's a feel-out process. You're seeing what you have, seeing what works. Again, there's a lot of guys returning from Kansas City, but in terms of the chemistry, in terms of trying to find what you got here, you may have the same guys, but it's a different team every year, different vibes around the organization and what have you. So Mahomes and Reid trying to suss that out, trying to figure that out, is going to be key to their success, obviously. And again, lackluster offensive performance in week 1, not a good offensive performance at all in week 2, given the defense they were facing in Jacksonville. And then last week against Chicago, who might have the worst defensive football, they looked awesome. Last night, outside of Isaiah Pacheco, nobody, including Taylor Swift's boyfriend, played all that well, including Mahomes himself. Again, Patrick Mahomes, only 203 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 really bad picks, and a passer rating at 63. Again, he was bailed out in a large part due to his running game, and props to Andy Reid for sticking with that throughout the night. I think we're overreacting to Kansas City. They'll be fine. Their defense is still playing really well. I wouldn't overreact. Who the Chiefs have next week? The Kansas City Chiefs next week have the Minnesota Vikings. They're going to run roughshod on Minnesota in Minnesota. We know how that's going to go, okay? As for the New York Jets, so I do not believe, I firmly do not believe in moral victories. What did Herm Edwards say, former head coach of the New York Jets? You play to win the game. It's one of the most famous head coach sound bites ever. It's one of my favorite. And it's true. It doesn't matter if you win 3-0 or if you lose, like the Chiefs lost that game to the Rams years ago, 54-51. You'll take the 3-0 W. Okay, doesn't matter how you got to do it. You just get the dub. It's not like the AP poll where you got to look good. It's got to be a sexy win. No. You just win. It's the NFL. You win, you move on to next week. That's how it works. And so that's what makes the league so great. It's what makes sports so great, professional sports in particular. Again, I don't believe in moral victories. But that had to be, if this is even a thing, last night, that had to be the best loss I've ever seen. Ever seen from a team this year in the NFL in 2023. Because you had the entire media, by the way, stick in my hand, myself included, that were not just bagging on the New York Jets, Robert Saleh, Joe Douglas, but Zach Wilson. We were, and I think rightfully so, clobbering him for his play through the first couple of weeks of the season, or at least the first couple of weeks since he took Aaron Rodgers' place after that week 1 game against Buffalo. Dating back to his last couple of years, just bad football, careless play. It seemed like it was some confidence problems going on there. Everybody's talking about how great Zach Wilson played, and he did. He outplayed Mahomes, there's no question about it. I get he had the fumble at the 50-yard line. He does deserve blame for that. But 2 things, one in particular, but 2 things that I love from Zach Wilson, and it's funny, I'm actually going to talk about an AFC East quarterback, another AFC East quarterback in the next segment. It's not Josh Allen or Tua, so you kind of narrow it down from there. What I loved about what Zach Wilson did, again, the guy has been, and again, rightfully, clobbered for the last 2.5 years. And certainly through the first part of this season. He's no good. He's inaccurate. He's wild with the football. The Jets don't trust him. Again, I think all of these things, certainly through the first part of this year, are 100% true. Check the tape. What I loved about Zach Wilson, though, didn't let it get to his head. Matter of fact, he in the New York market tuned all of it out, put himself in position to be successful again against a very good Chiefs defense. This is the best Chiefs defense in the Mahomes-Andy Reid era. It is. There's no question about it. Check all the numbers. Check the film. They're absolutely the best defense that Mahomes and Reid have had in Kansas City. Tunes out the noise. Doesn't worry about that. Obviously, there's always media. There's always press surrounding Jets games, especially there was going to be even more had Aaron Rodgers stayed healthy. And even with the Rodgers injury, we're looking at Zach Wilson with a, we're a lot more we're scrutinizing a lot more than we did maybe in years past because of the improved offensive staff around him, despite a bad offensive line, which I actually thought played pretty well. He tuned out the noise. And by the way, the noise coming from Taylor Swift there, and I think Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively and Hugh Jackman, everybody's there at MetLife. I mean, even a couple of teammates of mine in the Grid Network, Barry Grant Jr. and Alfred Parsons Jr., they were there in the stadium, okay? It's a big night. Defending champs in town. Didn't let it get to his head. Didn't allow it to put himself in a position where he's compromised himself. And you know what I loved maybe more than that? After the game, probably the best game of Zach Wilson's NFL career, given the circumstances. What's the first thing he says? I cost my team tonight because of the fumble at the 50-yard line. Remember a year ago? Game in November against the New England Patriots. Probably the two worst quarterbacks in football, though maybe you can't say that about Zach Wilson today, but Patriots, Jets, it's 3-3 late in the fourth quarter. It's been an absolute dud of an offensive football game by both sides. Zach Wilson plays poorly. His defense plays outstanding. New England ends up returning a punt to win the game on a touchdown, and they ask Zach Wilson the last question of that press conference. I think it was the last question. Do you take any accountability? Do you feel responsible somewhat for your team losing, given how great your defense was today? One-word answer, and I quote, no. And that was it for Zach Wilson from a confidence perspective, in particular from the New York Jets in him. Forget just him and himself, from the New York Jets, from Robert Saleh and him. You then have Mike White starting the next week. You had the Jets players come out with Mike White t-shirts and the whole bit. It was a mess for Zach. He put himself in that spot, though. But being around Aaron Rodgers, being around a mature veteran quarterback, forget veteran quarterback, one of the greatest to ever do it, you don't think that didn't affect him in some way, shape, or form? Again, it's being around certain, you can tell a lot about somebody based on who they surround themselves with, whether it's their friend group, whatever the case may be. And a lot of times, maybe if you don't have the right people around you, with Zach Wilson may have not in New York, but you get an adult in there, a guy who's been there, has done that. He's got 4 MVPs, got a Super Bowl. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer if he never plays another down. Just being in proximity of that guy can make all the difference in the world. And so you get props to Zach Wilson. Again, the Jets do lose this game, but if you're a Jets fan and you get any semblance of that last night, because you're not going to expect Zach to do that consistently because of what his history would tell you, but just a semblance of that. They got the Denver Broncos next week. Denver, who has one of the worst defenses in football. And by the way, that's the revenge game for the New York Jets, given what Sean Payton said about Nat Hackett, the offensive coordinator, back in the preseason. Remember that story. So the Jets are going to come into Denver with their hair on fire in that matchup. They got Philly at home. Philly's a buzzsaw right now. That's going to be a tough one to win. But then they got what is basically a neutral site game against the New York Giants. They can absolutely win that game. The Chargers, I don't know. Did you see Brandon Staley make yet another boneheaded coaching move? He can basically gift wrap that game and hand it to the New York Jets. They can win that game. How about the Raiders? Yeah, they can absolutely beat the Raiders. With Jimmy G, without Jimmy G, they can beat the Raiders. Raiders defense is awful. At Buffalo, that's dicey, although they did just beat Buffalo, but that's a tough place to go win at Orchard Park. Miami, Black Friday game, that's tough. Atlanta, Desmond Ridder, you kidding me? Of course they can beat Atlanta. Texans now, CJ Stroud looks awesome. That's going to be a tough one, but the Jets can win that one. Then you got Miami, the Commanders, the Browns, the Patriots. There's a lot of winnable football games on the schedule for the New York Jets, and whether or not Aaron Rodgers is going to come back this year or not, which he says he wants to, I get that it's a new Achilles surgery. It's a new technology they've used. We saw it work with Cam Akers. I just have a hard time seeing Aaron Rodgers come back just 4 months after literally blowing his Achilles, but hey, stranger things have happened. But I've said, and this is why I've clamored for the Jets to go get a quarterback, because Super Bowl hopes are done, they're gone, they're over with, forget about them, at least for this year. But you can't waste that defense again. You can't waste these skill position players again. Robert Saleh's in his 3rd year, jobs on the line. Joe Douglas, you can make the same case about. You got to win now. Well, if Zach Wilson gives you something similar to that, of course they can win now. So I don't usually say props to X, props to blank, whoever the team is. Props to the Jets. They play the defending champs to the wire. Again, some of that wasn't just bad Kansas City. Some of that was good Jets. Good Zach Wilson. Guy made some tough throws last night. I mean, he wasn't being it wasn't like a situation where he's in game managing mode and they're trying to handhold him as they have through a lot of his time there. No, he's out there making big boy throws, making Aaron Rodgers level throws, dare I say. Hats off to him. Great win for Kansas City. Even the best teams win ugly. They're allowed to win ugly. Hats off to him. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.